people get on the call. So I am here actually not in my normal place, which is my basement in the last half a year in Rye. I am in Israel. I came to Israel for a visit for several weeks. So now I'm in quarantine here. And I have here from Dallas, and we'll wait just a couple of minutes more, the great Trammel. So I'm very much excited to have Trammel here with us this morning. Good morning. How are you doing, Trammel?
Are you talking to me?
Yeah.
Doing great.
Great.
On the other side of the world.
Other side of the world, indeed. People are joining the call as we speak here. I'll just say maybe a couple of words. We had Trammel keynote our Dallas conference 2 years ago, I believe it was. And then this year, we decided to collaborate more closely, moving our conference to open right before EarthX. We'll talk about EarthX in a second. And Trammel, you were supposed to keynote both our Dallas and Houston conferences. But then COVID-19 came and changed a lot of stuff. We'll talk about that. And let me see, I see more people are joining us. And we'll, of course, talk about a lot of stuff today. And the idea of these sessions, every week I speak to an exceptional family, McLean coming up in 2-3 weeks from Houston. And the idea is, we are doing COVID days, which are crazy, and people deal with crisis, and everybody is talking about adjusting and changing yourself and all of that. And adjusting to the situations and dealing with crisis. By the way, I talked to 2 families. One was Sheraton, the other was Purdue from Saputo, from Canada. Both of those families did their best moves during the Great Depression. And I read about your father, correct me if I'm wrong, okay? The guy was so talented. He started in the grain industry, developed what he got to be huge, and then at the age, if I'm not mistaken, of 36 or 33 or 36, he understood that things don't work. I mean, it's dying out. He went to the real estate space, where you guys were starting to build buildings that are specially built for some tenants, and grew to become, I want to quote, that in '86, it was defined as the largest landlord in the United States, right? By one of the newspapers. And then later on, it went public and sold. So he adjusted, he went through crisis and all of that. So anyway, I believe that's the story. You, of course, are going to tell us all the stories. So good morning. That's it. I'm done with my opening spiel here. And it's lovely to see you.
Thank you, man.
How are you doing during COVID days? Texas has been spiking a little bit there. What's going on?
Well, when I complain to my friends about being cooped up here all the time, because it's been 5 years for me just working at this desk, they look at my house and they say, "Oh, we love the quality of your problems, Trammel. No pity." But I've been here working nonstop for 5 years on this EarthX. It's been going on for 10 years, but we bit off more than we could chew 10 years ago, and we're still munching.
Right. Amazing. So yeah, we'll talk about EarthX. I think let's start, maybe with your personal story about your family that's very well known around the United States and the world. How was it, share with us the story, and how was it like for you to grow in a high net worth family that's so famous doing, yeah.
Well, talking about this kind of thing isn't natural for many people. So I'll go in fits and starts. But the first thing I'd point out about that is I was lucky that we weren't billionaires when I was a baby. My father built the business over time, so I really got to see it grow. I grew up in a neighborhood, Highland Park here in Dallas, which is now very ritzy and, let's say, a little ostentatious, but it wasn't that way a long time ago. We felt it was normal. I'm sure people on the other side of town didn't, but just like the world's changing, and the great wealth that's accumulated in the last couple of decades, wasn't that way before. My father went to public high school, and the almost the only form of entertainment would have been athletic and the lake. Everybody went to the lake. So my father, who grew up on a dirt road and was quite poor in America, was in a social situation where there weren't strata. You know, his buddies were rich guys or poor guys. It's not that way today. But he grew up on a dirt road, not far from here, and across the railroad tracks, which is today a highway, of course. My mother grew up, and she was wealthy. So you could say that my father had a little help in his marriage, but there were 8 people in the family. He was supporting the family as a teenager, plucking chickens and cabbing, being a cabbie for golfers. Didn't get to go to college. A man with fire in his belly. And as much as I've always, and the other kids have always respected and emulated our father, we don't have that fire in our belly in the same way. Now, I'm a workaholic. My ex-wife will tell you that. But the drive and the motivation for people who are truly self-made is an entirely different thing. And sometimes, or maybe usually, translates into ultimately their motivation is just to get more money or points, business points, and they're never satisfied. And motivation of a second or a third generation is a different thing.
Absolutely. I have my wife is from Finland, or I hope she doesn't listen, or anybody from this area doesn't listen now. But usually at 4, they're off work and they're with the family. And when we started to do the conferences, she went up to some of my speakers and say, you don't need to work anymore. And I told her, listen, talk to him. The guy is 80 years old. He works 24/7. Larry Silverstein, one of the families we love and we're very close to is Silverstein. Every single day, Larry Silverstein goes to the office. So that's the passion that entrepreneurs have. It's not the money that drives them anymore, or at all. It's doing something, which I completely understand. Now, you obviously, first of all, your father's story is amazing because he had 2 careers, right? He had 2 different businesses. In both, he excelled very nicely, in a way.
I would put it differently. He had the jobs he needed to have to grow up in business. He was a bank runner and a bank teller, and then when he married, he ran that family business, which was grain elevators for storage of grain on railroad tracks. But that was all really just a step towards his ultimate move. Now, like a lot of parents and a lot of driven fathers, he didn't really talk about his past to us very much. So we're putting the pieces together. But no, I'd say that he was always meant to be the entrepreneur.
Amazing. So you went into real estate at some point, and you chose your career there. So what can you tell us about that experience, the pros and cons of your experience in the real estate space?
I'll jump right into it. I was spared the luxury of angsting over what was I going to do in life. Other seniors in college were all scurrying around trying to figure out what they wanted to do in life. I think that would have been hard for me because I'm kind of a dreamer. The field is too open to choose. Looking back, I might have made some different choices. Looking back, realizing, if I may say, that you can succeed in the entertainment business without great artistic talent. You can succeed in Hollywood without really being a great actor as known in the old days of the stage, or a great musician, not without really knowing how to compose music. My choices might have been different. But the first thing I'd say is going into the family business was not the best choice for me as a person, and for personal development. It's not because I was working under a father who held me down. My father was the opposite of that. He wanted the kids to succeed any way they could. But looking back on it, I was just coddled. Yeah, I was the head of a big business, appointed as the head of a big business long before I should have been. Today, we have a nepotism policy, which is so rigorous that it's almost impossible for the kids to go to work in our company. And I know big business guys here, big oil guys in Dallas, whose companies in the second generation aren't what they used to be because they brought the kids in and given them too much authority. And I believe in a great strict nepotism policy personally.
And your siblings, you have siblings that work in the company?
Yeah, there were 6 of us. We're all getting on in age, so now there are 4. Lynn's with us.
Yeah. I will make her an attendee.
Hey, Lynn.
Hi there. I will move her to the other side. Sorry about that.
Businesses that have really flagged over the years because of letting kids in the business. And I'm so impressed nowadays with, again, all this new wealth, and like we are today, people sharing what they do personally with their foundations and their children. And so many of them say, we're paying for the kids through college and that's the deal. And it's better for somebody to do that. If you wanted to compromise and say, make the kids wealthy, there's some magic number, is it $5 million or $25 million? Then stop. It's best for society.
And then at some point the company went public and sold, right? Or
yeah, that it really happened as a result of the real estate crash of the mid 80s, 1987. We going public was a different matter, but we eventually, like all real estate developers in the 80s, we struggled for several years to stay alive. And we lost a lot of our properties, our net worth. I know an oil guy who was a billionaire back then, and he was reduced to $10 million.
wow.
And he's a billionaire again. So there's something about certain people that you can't hold them back. But the real estate crash of the 80s changed our company forever. And it was at the same time that my father had Alzheimer's. And so my brother Harlan, I have the name Trammel, but I'm the 4th kid. I don't know about that. But my brother Harlan was clearly the best businessman. So it was just a tough time with the crash and my father going down at the same time and Harlan ascending. And we emerged well, and he rebuilt the company as Crow Holdings. So we are not Trammel Crow Company, but we're Trammel Crow Residential. Real estate just stopped. It stopped in its tracks back then in the 80s. The empty space in downtown Dallas, and it was one of the worst places, but all over the country, the vacancy was 25%. 20 years passed before a building of any size was built in the central business district. 20 years. Although the uptowns in the near urban areas prospered. So everybody was out of the real estate business. So our company now is essentially an investor in property, private closed funds, and our development of multifamily and warehousing is not a sideshow, but it's not the main business. We manage other people's money now.
And thank you for sharing that. And obviously, you guys built some of the most famous buildings out there. I mean, the skyline in Dallas, some of the most famous buildings. But can you tell me about, I read about it, the unusual nature of some of the projects that the company was involved with, Dallas Market Center, Infomart, the film studios. Can you talk about
in downtown Dallas, the skyline, part of the skyline was ours. And we lost those buildings. One of them still bears the
I'm sorry, Trammel, can you hear me? Yeah, we lost your audio. We cannot hear you. We don't hear you. Wait a minute. That's
Can
it.
you hear me now?
So now you got to tell us the story from the start, from the skyline that you guys built. Then you started to talk about all the different projects. Now we hear you.
I am very proud of my father and my brother, because when you look at the Dallas skyline, there's a chunk of it that were our buildings, our skyscrapers. But we kept away from that type of project. Do you remember the 3 rules of real estate? Location, location, and location.
Yeah.
Well, what that really means is don't stray very far from your home base. Our international division, primarily Europe, was not the greatest idea. Part of that's because of politics. Imagine a Texas developer trying to build a building in downtown Paris. No. He's at a competitive disadvantage. But the Dallas Market Center was one of the more, what I call, conceptual real estate business. It's 6 million square feet today, but it's not a real estate project, it's an operating business. A hotel is not a real estate business to the hotel company, just to that local property owner, usually. So if you take a convention, a trade show like the National Houseware Show with 30,000 people twice a year and all these temporary exhibits, and you put that in a permanent building like a shopping center, but no one can come in that shopping center except the retail store buying from the manufacturer or the wholesaler. That's the Dallas Market Center. And these are for consumer products, apparel, furniture, gifts, decorative accessories. New York, Chicago, Dallas, Atlanta, San Francisco, and LA have larger merchandise marts. So I was in that business. And then we built the Infomart, which is the 1.5 million square foot building, which is the closest facsimile of the Crystal Palace ever built. And the Crystal Palace was the first World Fair in 1851 in London in Hyde Park.
Right.
And it was the first steel and glass building. So we took that architecture for the most modernistic merchandise mart in the world, information technology and communications.
And then another project was the film studios.
And I was also lucky to be involved in that. I got to build a film studio. Now, how much fun can you get? Dallas was, I don't know where it is now, the third largest center in America of communications production, going from book publishing to radio jingles to commercial television and theatrical. So we built a soundstage building where the actual filming is done with primo sound stages, but we didn't invest in the movie making at all. We rented it out to the big studios in LA, and around it we built office space and warehouse space for production companies and camera rental equipment companies and little offices for scriptwriters, and created a community called the Dallas Communications Complex. And that was also conceptual real estate.
Now we have a lot of questions from people, Trammell, as expected from an interesting guest like yourself. But guys, be patient because I'm getting there. I have a plan here, okay? So don't ruin my plan. I'm going through different milestones here. So the next, so before we jump to other people's questions, let's talk a little bit about China. You went to China. You fell in love with Asian art. Today there's the Crow Museum of Asian Art, and then we'll talk about other topics, including EarthX, because everybody asking about EarthX. But before that, tell us about that.
I'll try to be brief because this is surely a personal indulgence, and it has to do with the Dallas Market Center. We had a building called the World Trade Center, but it was not a World Trade Center with offices for companies and trading companies and international consulate offices and so forth. It was a large merchandise mart. And when we built it with a foundation of 8 stories that could hold a vertical expansion, and built it to 15 stories for 3 million square feet, which is the size of one of those old World Trade Center towers in New York. Back in 76, I guess it was, the Chinese took notice, and they were very clever. And they realized that these merchandise marts are distribution centers. They're Trojan horses. So they sent trade delegations there every year, ultimately winding up with millions of square feet of Chinese product being represented by these domestic distribution companies to sell product throughout America. So they came every year back in the old days when they were very uniform, and they all wore the same short white sleeve shirts and polyester black slacks. And high-level trade delegations would always or frequently include the mayor of Shanghai. The mayor of Shanghai traditionally has been the path to take to be the chairman of the Communist Party. So we got to know them and developed relationships with Jiang Zemin, who was the chairman, one person after Mao Zedong. And we had good times with him here in Dallas and in China. We taught the chairman of the Communist Party to drive a pickup truck because he'd never been behind the wheel of a vehicle. And then we would go over there and have wonderful tours back starting in 1976. And not many foreigners went to China back then, saw the Forbidden City when it was in shambles and overgrown by briars and brambles, and got to tour China when it didn't resemble anything today. By the mid 80s, it was changing.
Mm-hmm.
So there were 10 years in there when we got to see places that were vehicles were unknown. Americans were spectacles. And if we went to a retail store, and there were not many retail stores back then in China, 50 or 100 or 200 people would immediately gather to see what is the gaijin looking at? What is the round eye looking at? Would leave the hotel, and the plainclothes policeman would follow us. All the interesting stories of the past, and great friendships. So in that process, we did. My father and mother already had a mild interest in an amateurish interest in Asian art. So we really started buying things. I wouldn't buy jade today. It's too damn expensive. But back then, we made wonderful collections. So there's a small but very beautiful museum in downtown Dallas called the Crow Collection of Asian Art. I've been a Sinophile ever since, and I think the immigration in America is our tradition, and the Asian populations are a fantastic addition to our national spirit and work ethic.
Before we touch EarthX, I promise last question before EarthX, because everybody asking about EarthX here on this side. So can you talk just a little bit about your early retirement and your civic work? I think on the LinkedIn post, I couldn't put your entire civic work because it would just say you have too many words. I had to cut some positions you were involved in order to get the post on LinkedIn.
Well, it's kind of personal. When I was 43, I got divorced, and it was a shock, as it would be for anyone. So I decided to take a year off to be with my children. I could afford to do that. I think divorce is a terrible thing, and the children are always the losers. So I took a year off to be with them. 5 years later, I said, oh my God, I forgot to go back to work, didn't I? I was having too much fun, not with the children, but with civic work, nonprofit work. So when I realized I'd forgotten to go back, I continued just as a civic citizen. 15 years after I left the company, I finally got seriously involved in environmental work.
Great. So now, again, before I get to others people's questions, I will just ask you about what everybody seems to be wants to talk about EarthX. So if you can talk about the beginning of EarthX. I mean, when I spoke with you, I said, could you explain your obsession with the environment? Because you're really devoted, like I haven't seen anywhere. I mean, very few are as devoted as you are to the environment. So the beginning of EarthX, Earth Day Dallas, or Earth Day Texas Evolution to EarthX, and its unique role in the environment space. How did you come to do that? It's one of the largest, or the largest conferences or happenings about the environment that's going on around. Thousands of people, right?
Yeah, we had 180,000 people last year.
Wow.
This year we were all ready for 200,000 people, but of course we had to postpone the show till next year or whenever. And the moral of that story is we learned to go online, and EarthX TV will really start in earnest in September. EarthX.org is the website. So,
right.
Yeah, I think maybe an important message I could try to deliver today is what is our passion as far as giving back. The old-fashioned term is noblesse oblige. The more fortunate you are, the more responsible you must be to giving back. And I know a lot of good people who in the upper classes who are that way. And I've met wonderful people in the environmental world from all walks of life who are that way. So it just has so happened that I learned the word environment when I was 12 years old in the 60s. And I realized then that that was the most important issue in the world to me. But the story is, the lesson to be learned is, I felt like that was off in the future. As an inheritor of wealth, I felt like I had to prove myself and I had to make my own money before I could just start doling it out. And that's an extreme path that I do not recommend. I think a balanced path is much better. And I see that happening much more often today with people, young people, not just wanting to get a job and a career, but a job that has social impact. And that's the beautiful thing and the hope of our society today. So the way it happened was, two businessmen in Dallas came to me. I was retired and reclusive. And they said they couldn't find anybody in downtown Dallas who was an environmentalist. So they heard about me. I'm not sure how, because I really had not engaged too much, but made a few passive financial contributions to things. Things were very small back then. Things were incipient and beginning. There wasn't a recycling program for office buildings downtown. There was none of that. So starting those things out weren't as difficult and as monumental a task as what we have to do today, all of us. So we started the Texas Business for Clean Air, and went to battle with the environmental groups, with the Sierra Club, with the Environmental Defense Fund, and so forth, to oppose the utility company here, who was trying to get permits to build coal-fired plants, and they wanted 11 permits for 11 coal-fired plants with not the best technology. And it was clear to the general public and even to the business community, which was tended to be more sympathetic to the utility company, that it was a power grab. They wanted fast track approval from the governor right now for 11 dirty permits. So Texas Business for Clean Air was the business opposition to that. And what it taught me was that even in Texas, conservative business leaders not only can admit the truth, but act upon it. 200 major business people in the state of Texas joined this and opposed that, and the battle was won. So my story is, I realized that I was finally engaged and working in the environment and would be forevermore. That project was over. So it's kind of a simple explanation. What to do next? What environmental issue? Climate wasn't the all-encompassing issue like it is now, but it was like in college. Rather than make a serious career choice, I didn't have to. I just realized that Earth Day was coming up in 5 months, and let's have an Earth Day, by golly. So without researching or seeing what Earth Days were in America, because there aren't many Earth Day events outside of America, we just decided to do it the way we thought it was done, which was to get environmental groups, corporations that have green stories to tell, and students and schools and universities and government agencies, all to come together and have exhibits and show what they did to educate the general public. We had 200 entities, mainly environmental groups, and 40,000 people. And after those 2 days, we thought that was a big success, but not earth-shaking. Then we found out that was the biggest environmental gathering, the biggest Earth Day in the world. And if, excuse my French, but that pissed me off. What do you mean? This is the biggest. Why isn't this happening in London? Why isn't this happening in New York? Why isn't this happening in Tokyo? then we realized that Earth Day is a name. The second most recognized secular holiday in the world after New Year's Day is Earth Day, but nothing happened. So we just continued here in Dallas where it's needed the most. There's no preaching to the choir with speakers and films, but primarily exhibition and human contact, education and awareness. And if for no other, maybe the energy that we gave to it, but primarily the void in the world, it grew. People from the West Coast, the East Coast, we started conferences, scientists, environmental leaders, philanthropists, activists. But since we didn't read the rule book and since we didn't know what we were doing, we didn't just have a climate event or like happens in the environmental world, a specific issue, ocean, air pollution, soil health. We did it all because we didn't know better. And the magic was those disciplines don't know each other. So when the ocean conference is over and people come out and they meet the sustainable farmers and ranchers, there was just a lot of hail fellow well met. There was a lot of what I call the snap, crackle, and pop. It's hard to measure, but a conflagration of all types of environmental activists and corporations at the same time coming together, and it's just created a magic. So now we're putting it online. I hope the magic will come through the screen right at you.
Yeah, and we will promote it once you have information to send us. And I hope that next year we'll be back to meet one another in person. And I have several more questions, but maybe just somebody writes here. Herbert Nietzsche, the Austrian-born world record setting free diver, diving down 830 feet on one breath, is a friend and a strong advocate for clean oceans. What is EarthX doing, and how can global companies help preserve a clean the oceans and ensure a key food source for billions of people?
What is EarthX doing, particularly in the area of ocean and marine life? We're bringing together corporations that involve in this, activists whom they've never met, scientists, again, whom they've never met, and the general public in conference, in expo, in engagement with action items as a result of conferences. We set we raise the bar for an industry. Maybe it's forestry, but in this case, ocean health, in coral reef, overfishing, island health, sea level rise. But it's a great way, ocean's a great way to attack the climate problem without saying climate all over it. Because when you say climate, a lot of people down here, they don't listen to you anymore. They can be wonderful land conservationists, but when you say climate, they don't believe. So we're bringing philanthropists to the issues. We're getting to the point where we're working on petitions. We're exposing people to the campaigns of the environmental groups. And we're bringing politicians from the Democrats and Republicans together to talk about ocean to the people. And the politicians are learning something about it too. Lindsey Graham, the primary environmental Republican senator, and Sheldon Whitehouse, the great Democratic hero senator from Rhode Island, who I think has ocean as his main cause, get on the stage here together. And starting in September, Lindsay and Sheldon have told us that they are creating a climate brigade, half Republican and half Democrat senators to come online in force. So I think that will motivate people to vote and get educated, call their favorite NGO, but I think it'll educate the politicians a little bit too.
And another question, Trammel, with all the energy sector opportunities in Texas and your history in supporting environmental efforts globally, what type of interesting innovations you're seeing in the region that connect to these two verticals? So the energy sector, the environmental sector.
Well, there are just too many to say. We have eCapital Summit for 4 years now, where we bring the innovator startups for clean tech and energy tech, and the venture capitalists and the private offices of Texas who aren't familiar with these things. And typically it's been about 50 or 60 investors and 50 or 60 startup innovators. And by the end of the 2 or 3 days, millions of dollars begin to make deals and fund over the next 12 months. I'm going to guess that $25 million or 30 will be invested over the next 10 months from the last conference of eCapital Summit. There's waste to energy, hydrogen, and can't say enough about those that are the future. Closed loop, a circular economy must have waste to energy. But maybe, and again, we can say things in Dallas about the environment that you can't say in San Francisco, dude. Maybe nuclear is something that really needs to be promoted more, and small modular nuclear plants are much less expensive. The safety records have been proved, and look at France, and more Democrats are coming around to nuclear. And the environmental groups in the last 5 years slowly have been coming to appreciate that nuclear is there's no silver bullet. So you need all these things, and you need fracking too. But nuclear could be a great hope. Here, in the oil and gas business in Texas, it's undeniable. We can't say no fracking. We would alienate businesses that can do a lot of good things in this world. So we have an oil and gas conference and a renewable energy conference, and dozens of exploration companies come and listen to scientists talk about how to frack better, how to frack more cleanly. Not politically correct, but natural gas is a transition fuel.
What's the future of green investments? How do you see that?
Of wind?
Of green investments in general. How do you see the future?
A big future. Take the energy companies. They're already in these businesses. They're game changers. I don't know how many money managers are out there nowadays with not just social impact investment companies, but environmental strictly. And I think Barron's magazine said recently that those corporations that have strong sustainability practices and ESG, environment, society, and governance, all those politically correct, more profitable than companies that do not practice that now. So green investment can be by investing on the stock market, but the opportunities for social impact investors is huge with early growth stage companies, not just the startups.
Interesting, yeah. And then what's the future of philanthropy in the environment? Philanthropy, yeah, in that segment.
Mm-hmm. Well, there are some great philanthropists out there they're really invested themselves with many millions of dollars, and I salute Ted Turner, and I salute Tom Steyer, and I salute Jay Faison for working so hard, not only for investing, but philanthropy and lobbying so many tens of millions of dollars as they do. But when you look at the Forbes 400 list, there's just not enough. Maybe now with COVID, people are gonna, I'm not saying don't give money to the arts, and I'm not saying don't put your name on a building, but maybe people will really realize that we have to meet the problems that are imminent and upon us, not just the icing on the cake and the quality of life, but we've got to get down to basic issues. Philanthropists that give to the environment tend to give to green spaces and parks and land conservation, and like the Trust for Public Land and the Nature Conservancy do wonderful jobs. But there's a crying need now, not just for philanthropists to give to climate action groups, but to all different environmental issues. And whoever asked that question earlier about marine life is really on the point. Marine life and endangered species, we can do something about it. Overfishing is going to take away the food on our plate because of the food chain, and the endangered species, whether they're exotic or not, whether they're Africa big game or not, the only thing that is keeping us from saving those is law, is sovereign law and international law. Those game reserves and game wardens can solve the problem if the governments allow them to. And we're talking about corruption primarily, and Chinese trade.
I've interviewed on one of our sessions the drummer of Guns N' Roses, one of the biggest drummers in the United States that played with everybody, Elton John, Brian May, Steven Tyler, and he devotes his life, everything he does beyond music is in the environment. And I think I should put you guys together at some point. I think the first time I saw you, I said, you know, Trammel Crow is not just a lovely person, next generation. With the first thing I asked you, with long hair and everything, I said, this guy looks so cool. Is what kind of music do you listen to, Trammel? So, by the way, what kind of music do you listen to, Trammel? Nobody knows.
Me?
I'm going to ask it here.
Almost every night, I listen to Bob Dylan and Paul Simon.
Oh, that's
I'm a throwback. I love all music besides country, western, and opera.
And I said, we spoke this week, and I shared with you that, you know, with COVID and everything, what we're trying to do now is with our friends at the Silverstein family at the World Trade Center. You mentioned the World Trade Center. In mid-September, we'll be doing an event at the New York's largest terrace, which is amazing. If we will not have a huge second wave, and I really hope, we talked about it, that you would keynote that if it will be, you know, if things will get better and you could come to New York to keynote that conference. We would love that.
Well, thank you very much. I'd love to come. If New Yorkers will allow Texans at that time of need, I'd be honored.
Yeah. Now, maybe one last question here from somebody, very specific. So I don't know if you know the answer for that, because I know at EarthX, you have loads of topics that you guys deal with. But this guy is asking about some nations have abused fishing rights of smaller countries. Has EarthX focused on that issue and how can satellite technology monitor and help these smaller nations. So it's a very specific.
Did you say small nations? I'm sorry, say that again.
He said he was talking about larger nations abusing the fishing rights of smaller.
Yeah, it just comes down to the same old thing. What do we do about this? How do you stop? I suppose Norway is doing a lot better. There are some real sinners, some real villains in larger countries in America that are just obeying the letter of the law and going a few miles outside of the economic zones or the international waters and depleting the marine life, and those people are suffering because of it. Historically, the way that those things have been solved is economics. It wasn't Greenpeace that saved the whales. It was better ways to replace what whales served. It was kerosene and then other forms of energy. So innovation is the great hope that we are all hanging our hats on, but the foreign governments, big corporations, these have nets miles long and miles deep, and these mining companies that are scraping the ocean floor that's never been touched. Billions of years. Don't touch it. We don't know it's there.
Yeah, I agree. So, so maybe my last question. I mean, if you have anything else that you'd like to talk about, then we'd be happy to hear. But maybe when is the TV gonna be ready? When is EarthX TV gonna be launched and people and when will that happen?
Our first day will be September the 8th. We haven't done a whole lot of publicity. We're scrambling and scurrying to have so many different programs on, again, addressing all issues. During Climate Week, we'll be doing things special. There will be several different times. We'll have health and the environment, which I think people really want to learn about and don't know much about COVID and the environment, but it's clearly an environmental cause of these viruses. And we'll have policy programs every week talking about the coming elections.
Interesting. So when that is ready, when you have more information, we would love to share it with our family offices so they can join and spread the word about that. Yeah.
We do have another very small exclusive program called the Donor Roundtable, where family offices can learn about philanthropic and political matters.
And that has been going for how long?
We don't put that online, or we don't put that on TV. I guess we Zoom that nowadays.
So if somebody if somebody wants to learn about that, or maybe join that, how do you do that? They just reach out to you? Me and Lynn McBee by email, and we will get those to the right people. Yeah. Brilliant. So so great, Trammel. It was a pleasure spending an hour here with you.
Appreciate it.
Usually at conferences we don't get to talk too much, and here we got an hour to talk about interesting topics. I really wish that I will see you in person in New York City and with the Silverstein family. And yeah, so again, I would like to thank you for this opportunity.
What's the date?
The date?
What's the date?
Oh, now you got me in front of everybody, and I don't know the date. I think it's the 24th. I think it's
there's a set date. Okay.
I think so. We'll send it to you. We'll send it to you and to our families. Maybe my team just sent me a text about that. And I just want to say, which is what I say every every discussion that next week my guest is Stephen Nasser, who's the longest running chairman of any Jewish federation in history that raised $8 billion to the causes of the things they stand for. So I would love for everybody to join me then. And Trammel, anything else that you would add? Anything at all?
Thank you for that opportunity for that last shot. I just say we can do this. It's not all climate. Go vote, and in your daily lives, we can beat the environmental problems.
And then, you know what? Let me ask you something that I probably shouldn't, but I always do that. No, I'm kidding. So what do you think is going to happen with the elections? If you had to take a guess, you think it's obvious?
I know one thing, two things. The Republicans think they have it in the bag, and the Democrats think it's a shoe-in. So
it's going to be interesting. Great. So Trammel, thank you so much for being here. We're looking forward to seeing you in person in New York, and definitely next year in Houston and Dallas.
Thank you, and look forward to meeting you all.
Thank you so much.
Shalom.
Thank you, everybody, for joining me. Shalom. Thank you. And again, apologies that this is how I look like, but I'm in quarantine in Israel because I just came here for vacation. So sorry for this. Thank you, everybody.